Hello, Sarah. How's it going?
Hello, it's been a while.
It has been a
Like,
while.
I
It's
have
been
not I mean, you guys did an episode or 2 without me, but it's been a while since I've been on this.
yeah. We're at episode. This is episode 71. We've been doing this like almost a year and a half or 2 years or something. I definitely find it's harder as it goes on. It's harder to get people on. Things come up, life situations change.
I feel like it's just been, like, a crazy travel time. I have so much travel.
Yeah,
We usually record on Tuesday, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
always traveling.
What are you even traveling on?
So, and this is actually a good topic, but there's been a couple conferences that are like industry related in
Yeah.
childcare ed tech. But I've also had like these, and I have one coming up, these like founder retreats that like VCs put together for their portfolio companies. So I had one a couple weeks ago. I have one coming up in New York that I have to go to. And these are like
Have
multi
to. I like
day
it.
like, overnight, things, and, I'm like, not to be too, like, negative, but and I do always get value out of them, and I enjoy them, but it's
Yeah.
like, is this really the best use of my time? I'm trying to, like, make sure I'm traveling for the right thing.
So what's your take on it? Have they been helpful?
I mean, the last one I went to, I was talking to some of the other founders that were there, and I'm like, "Are you what are you getting out of this?" And I think my takeaway was like some founders just really need a break, like an actual retreat.
Got it.
And so my advice, like if I were a VC, I would plan these to be like a real getaway, like relaxation, kind of really nice break for founders and also a chance to connect with other founders and talk
Right.
about topics. But like it seemed like the people who got the most out of it just really needed a break, and I don't need a break. Like, my time well, if I'm gonna take a break, I'm gonna go get some sleep or, like, hang out with my family,
Right.
go on a trip with my kids. Like, I don't need, like, a retreat with other founders for me personally. So for me, like, I'm trying to make the most of it, but, like, I just by virtue of the fact that VCs don't typically invest in competitive companies, like, I
Yeah.
don't get, that much out of networking with the other founders besides, like, some of them are really nice and I like them and I enjoy it.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, do VCs do it to is this like one of their parts of showing value to bring all these founders together? Is it because they just want to go and have a fun time to also
Yeah.
let loose as well? Or they trying to, yeah,
I feel like they
actually
feel like
help
they have to
founders?
as one of, like, their value add things and it's,
Yeah.
like, part of their pitch and their package and their brand, but I guess I would just make the case that, like, you don't have to.
I think there's definitely something I think that, there's something to it. I think that if you get like imagine like the best of the best, right? Like they're in just in business in general. There's like so many different like there's Davos and all of these other conferences that like the best of the best come together
Right.
and in one place, and this is the time you get. And it's like deals actually get done on these types of places. So I think it's like obviously a much smaller tamped down version of that. So I've went to these things too. I think we both went to the lobby conference, which is one of the main ones for founders and VCs.
Yeah, but that
I've
one,
met some
like
people there.
I mean, the reason I love that one so much is, like, it brings together founders and
Yeah,
VCs across different portfolios and different industries, and, like, so it really is it does feel like a best of the best, who's who type
right,
conference where I've made really good connections, but the, like, founders in our portfolio only type conferences
right.
don't feel as valuable to me,
Huh,
even if they're fun and enjoyable, which, like, great, but
right.
just don't
You got
need
work to
more
do.
fun and enjoyable things in my life. Like,
You're topped out on fun and
it's like if I'm ready to take a break and have fun, that's probably not gonna be, like, top of my list,
Yeah.
What I love is actually what Homebrew does, and I think you, have experienced this back in the day. They have just a dinner once a year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Those have been
and it's
helpful.
like it's
Yeah.
totally optional, no pressure whatsoever to attend.
Yeah.
So if it's not local to you, like, you don't have to fly in for it, and it's just, like, one night, and it's great. So I
Right.
kinda know the Homebrew, other founders. It's a great chance to connect, but it's not like a huge commitment in
Right.
time that
Right.
some of these multi-day retreats are.
I think it goes the same thing with just like your own like offsites as well. I think like if you're having them for like 5 or 7 days or something like that, like that's way too long. It's gotta be it's like Vegas. It's like 2 days max. Like I
Right.
think that you gotta have them. But I think I found a lot like Lobby was great. What's another one? I've went to South by Southwest and there's also like different cliques too. So like if you get invited to certain like parties and certain things like that. That's a higher echelon of entrepreneur that's going to be there and stuff like that. And you're able to meet people you wouldn't have before. So there's definitely value, but I think most of the people that I know that go to those things, they're not successful and they just like going and partying and doing all that other shit. And they're not actually focused on their business. So I don't know, maybe for VCs is a way to kind of like understand like the motivations of some of these founders.
No,
Get
because
a
'cause
cross them off the list.
I've tried to, like, politely decline these, and, like, it's for a couple of my VCs, like, it's not an option, like, they want me there.
Oh, you
Uh,
just say no. Sarah, you can
no, like, I
just
got
say
out of it
no.
one year because I was getting surgery. Like, that was okay, but, like,
Yeah.
everything else does not count. Um, yeah, I don't know, like, I think the big conferences are different, like, because South by Southwest, you might
Yeah.
go to promote your company
Right.
and speak on panels, and that's more of a press thing, but these
Yeah.
are usually closed, really small groups, and it it seems like it's geared more towards helping founders.
Yeah.
I guess I'm feeling like, I don't know, there's a lot of ways I can spend my time. Uh,
I think it really depends on where you are in your career. I think if you are like a relatively like newer founder and
right.
you're not plugged into the community that well, especially if you're not based in like Silicon Valley and doing any of the events or stuff like that, I think they probably are pretty valuable. I remember like when I was first just creating my network of people, like they were a lot more valuable than they would be today. Like I probably wouldn't get much value out of doing a lot of this stuff, unless it was like meeting like really high caliber founders. They've like IPO'd or something like that that I could like
Yeah.
really learn from. But so I think that early on, probably it would make more sense. And same with like a lot of the other stuff, like YC. Like I would say, if you're an early founder, especially if you're not from the Bay Area, you don't have any connections, go to YC. If you're not, don't fucking do it. It's a waste of like equity and like you probably it doesn't have as much pay as it does anyways. So that's a whole other conversation. But I think it's for if you're trying to build up your network, these are probably things to do. I still have connections from people who I've met at these things, and they were also earlier on in their like founder journey, and looking for other connections to make. And I think it's good. But if you're yeah, and some I'd say the majority of people there just go to like unwind, party, and just like
Right.
it's usually a waste of time most of the time.
Yeah, I think you like, as a founder, you gotta pick and choose. I also recently went to a conference that was like an ed tech industry conference and had a lot of early education folks, and that one was incredibly valuable. Like, I
Yeah,
did deals there,
right,
I
right,
got new customers, I talked to existing customers, like, that one, A++,
right.
uh, and totally worth my time. So, you gotta kinda judge these things for yourself, and it's hard, like, I'm almost 9 years in, and I'm still, like, not sure sometimes going into it, "Is this one worth my time? Is this one worth the
Yeah,
expense?" I mean, it's also not cheap to go to these
no,
things.
no.
You gotta pay for travel even if they're covering the, hotel cost or whatever.
Well, your company should be paying for that,
Right, right, right,
Sarah.
but, like,
Okay,
this is like a, and if you have, like, 2 founders going, that's like a couple $1,000
yeah,
from the company
yeah,
on something that isn't gonna necessarily result in a sale,
yeah.
in the same way we justify, like, sales travel.
Right. Yeah,
Y
I think it'd be different. I once what is, oh, the Summit series. Have you ever been to one of those?
I've heard of it, but no.
So those are more, I think, like the party ones. So I went on this
Yeah.
cruise that, where did
Yeah.
it
It's
go?
something at sea, someday
Yeah,
at
Summit at
sea.
Sea. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there was a lot of actually like really high profile talks there. But mostly it was just like debauchery, with their founders. And it was fun. That was more of a fun than anything else.
Right.
But
And I mean, some of these, it might be negative ROI, like, if you're getting
yeah,
wasted,
totally.
like, and making a fool of yourself, like, I'd rather just get
Oh
out with my
yeah.
friends who have no
Yes.
impact on my career.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of people that made a fool of themselves and, yeah, still talk about it to this day. Yeah. You gotta be careful about that too. Once you start making a name for yourself and you're around other people in the industry, like, that's not a good look. Like, you're gonna pitch a VC, like, a couple years after, and they've seen you just, like, shit-faced doing stupid shit. That's not
That's
that's not something that
the
you
story
should
of my
do.
life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah, those days are long gone.
It
Now I can't
it's
drink
yeah.
anything or I'm, like,
Yeah,
dead
me
for a
too.
week or something.
What was the next topic you had on here? SEO and the age of AI. I think AI in
Yeah.
general, I think it's like, I was trying to get like a week or a month's, worth of, AI guests, but I'm still trying to get on here. It seems like AI is just going so quickly, but you had SEO specifically on your mind.
Yeah, so, Lenny's podcast had a great episode on, like, SEO and how you should think about it in the new AI age,
Yeah.
and I think a lot what my big takeaway from that, and also because Winnie has a lot of traffic driven by
Yeah.
SEO and what we're
Yeah.
seeing, a lot of people are saying, "Okay, AI is gonna kill search."
Right.
Um, and really, like, sure, maybe that happens over the next many years. But I think in the short term, what's happening is actually Google itself. People are still using Google. Google traffic, Google traction is still, 99% of searches are still on Google. So that
Right.
hasn't been disrupted. But Google itself has changed in that now when you search for a lot of queries on Google, Google has now started showing an AI overview,
Yeah.
an AI answer
They're
that is pushing
Gemini.
down. Yeah, but they're incorporating that into the actual Google results. So people's usage, like, I think a lot of times it's like, oh no, like Google's gonna die and go away. Google's not going anywhere for a long time. Like
Yeah.
Google's good. The issue and what we see is not that Google's going away, but that Google itself is changing and putting an AI answer at the top of search results. So
Yep.
what this means is a couple things. One, Google's becoming way more pay to play because then the space below that answer is all ads.
Right. Right.
So there are truly no like organic results that you see in your kind of first view
Right.
of a search result. Um, and so ads are getting way more expensive. And then the organic traffic that websites were enjoying is really, really reduced because Google's showing ads and they're showing AI overviews. So that's kind of the lay of the land. As far as like what you can do about it, though, what I found really interesting about that episode and also what we're seeing on Winnie is that it's not really that um, you can't rely on Google anymore to
Yeah.
bring you users. It's that the users are coming through more like mid-funnel queries. So you shouldn't try to rank anymore for like, what is childcare?
Right.
What's a preschool? How much does
Right.
childcare cost? Like these kind of sort of top of funnel research queries, because Google will more and more just give you the answer and no
Yep.
one will click anything. But when you're actually going to transact or kind of take the next part of your journey, whether it's booking a flight or actually trying to tour a childcare provider,
Yeah.
like Google can't do that. And they're not trying to do that. And that's not happening. Like you still need to go to the website or service where you can actually do those transactions. That's still fair game. And so I think, what we're finding is like our SEO strategy, which has always been very long tail, um, is good. And then, as a product, you just have to make sure that people are really coming to your product, not for information, but for doing the transaction. So in our case, it's contacting the
Right.
childcare provider, booking a tour, things like that. So we're really investing in those kinds of transactional marketplace use cases. So I think, my takeaway from the podcast and also from our own experiences, like marketplaces are good.
Right.
Like even if your traffic to your marketplace is SEO, you've relied on SEO, that's okay as long as people are still coming to you to actually do the transaction. That's not really going to be displaced anytime soon. I mean, maybe one day AI
Yeah.
agent will take care of all that for
Yeah.
you.
Well, it's kind of like um I think it's really important, and it always has been, to diversify all of your different channels that you get customers from, right? Like a lot of channels have just dried up. What are some examples? Like Facebook, when they for especially for games, stuff like that. Like people built
Yeah.
entire businesses. Zynga built an entire business off of that, and then they completely changed everything, and then Zynga had to obviously change, and they had to create a relationship directly with their customer. I would think who else relies heavily. SEO is obviously a great one. Like I think of like Thumbtack. Thumbtack was like one of the first companies that really Thumbtack or Yelp. They really benefited off of just the super long tail. For Thumbtack, it was like
Right.
pros, and for Yelp, it was restaurants and stuff like that. They benefited, and they still have um, survived in the world of like Google displaying the answer up top, and now with Gemini, they're still doing this. And I know Yelp has like an antitrust case against Google, but I think Yelp is doing relatively fine. But you just have to continue to find out different channels, and I think it's probably a lot harder in consumer than it is business when you actually can like for you, like you can actually pay to be included in the search results for certain queries because you actually make money off of the transaction. So it's probably harder for some consumer companies, but I think that the overall advice is like you should never overly rely on like one traffic source. So that's where like if you're overly relied on like PR does not fucking last. Like, what's a great example? Who just had a massive launch? The most recent one, what was that one? That Friend Company. You remember the one? I don't know, a couple months ago or something like that. It's a AI recorder locket thing. Do you see the one friend.com?
Oh,
Um, yeah, they went
yeah,
huge,
did that
massive.
really go anywhere?
Probably not because they overly invested in PR. And so that could be a good jumpstart, but like they're going to have to get some sort of consumer products. They're going to have to get some sort of like viral loop
Right.
uh, or have good enough product that people are going to just have a good word of mouth presence. But like overly investing in any source of where you get your customers from or your users is just not really sustainable unless it is just your product so awesome that people will just continue to do it. But even look at like a company as big as Apple, like how many different ways do they get to you? Like they obviously have a big brand advertising spend. They obviously invest a lot in you connecting with your Apple ecosystem. They have a platform play. They advertise to you on everywhere. They'll advertise to you on Google. They advertise on to you on Amazon. They're all over the place. And so they always want to be on top of your mind. So you always should be thinking about that and not overly relying on it because it could be that one thing like AI, like SEO completely goes away. And so I think that you definitely need to always diversify the ways that you're getting your customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's helpful, like what we do is we just have a framework for like what it costs to
Yeah.
acquire a user from every channel, and like nothing is free. Like even
Right. Of
something
course.
like PR or SEO, like there's a cost to the developers and keeping up with the latest
Right.
SEO trends and all of that. PR, there's generally a cost in someone's time, if not also like an agency you're paying.
Yeah.
um, and some channels are much easier to calculate the ROI, like Facebook and Google,
Right.
things like that, where it's very easy to know what it costs you to acquire a user and what those users are worth. But um, we try to really do it for any channel. And I think that that helps you know where to make your bets. And it's also very cyclical. Like there was a period of time where Meta was just horrible. Like Facebook was not performing well
Right.
for anyone. I think with some of the tracking changes that were made, by Apple. And recently, like we've seen a huge resurgence in Meta
Yeah,
performance. Like
that's what I've
Meta's
heard.
is actually in some regions performing better than Google, like Google search ads for
Wow.
us, which is pretty surprising because you would think, someone looking for childcare on Google is like very intentional, like the most intentional they can be. But we've just seen really strong results from certain targeting and some of the campaigns we're running on Meta. So I think you just always have to be measuring and testing different channels and
Yeah,
having multiple channels so you
yeah,
can dial them up and down depending on how they're doing.
yeah, and there's people are always they always listen to podcasts like ours and trying to find the silver bullet, and there never is a silver bullet for your company, and you always
Yeah.
just need to figure
I
out.
actually had like an intro booking recently
Yeah,
where they were like, okay, like, here's my business. Like, how do I acquire users?
no, that's
Um,
not.
and
Yeah,
I was just like, there's no silver bullet. You have to know what a user is worth to you and what you're willing to pay to acquire that user. And then there's plenty of channels,
right,
and some may tap out sooner rather than later, but there's no free lunch.
right,
Everything has a cost in some way, shape, or form. So understand like how much money you make from user, what's it worth?
yeah,
And I think people are looking like, they see Winnie as a big SEO property and they're like, what's the magic for doing SEO? And it's like, there's no magic.
right,
You just have to know what a user is worth and what you're willing to invest to acquire that user.
right, right. Yeah, and I could go forever on AI. It's definitely I feel like I feel like it's peak hype right now. Like literally everything is an AI company. And obviously there's going to be a lot of companies that go away. The craziest, they seem like the silliest ideas that are just getting replicated like a dozen times over being created. But we always go through these hype cycles. We
Yeah, I
feel like
mean,
they'll
I was
last
just
forever.
reading like an article in the information about some of the AI companies that were recently funded. And there was one with like 30 million in revenue that had okay, wait, is it in this article? It had like 30 million in revenue and almost a $2 billion valuation.
Yeah.
It's just like this not okay. The San Francisco startup is raising okay, it's called Writer.
Right. Okay.
Um it develops large language models and software to make it easier for companies to build AI apps. Okay. They're raising between 150 and 200 million at a 1.9 billion valuation. Um, that doubles its valuation from its last round. And then later in the article, it talked about its revenue. It said uh, they, where did it talk about the revenue? Okay, it sells subscriptions to its tools. It was generating 40 million in ARR.
Yeah.
Uh, that's the expected revenue over the next 12 months. So
Got it.
we
Forward
actually get
revenue.
there.
Yeah.
It's currently at 30 million in ARR. Uh, okay. That's like, you do some math for me. $2 billion uh, divided by 40 million in ARR
Oh,
is
that's
what, a
like
50x revenue multiple?
on forward revenue. Yeah, that's pretty crazy, but it makes sense from a VC perspective. It all makes sense, right? Like what we're going through right now is the same thing that we went through in the dot com craze. Is that there is a ton of money to be made. Like there are going to be many trillion-dollar companies that come out of this phase, and VCs are just buying an option.
There's going to be many trillion-dollar
Yes,
companies that come out of this
absolutely.
phase.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think companies are scaling faster than they ever have before, and AI definitely is going to change so many different industries. And also AI is a super broad term. It's like very similar to like just computing in general. So I definitely think the companies are growing faster. They're building on top of a more sophisticated infrastructure already. And I think that there are like the OpenAIs of the world. I would definitely bet that there are going to be multiple like trillion-dollar companies that are like the large language models. Maybe there's some of the incumbents that take some of that, but all any of these VCs are betting that there's like a 5 or 10% chance that this investment is going to return like 10 to 50x on their investment. And that's all that they're doing. And so it's really like, it's scary from a founder perspective because I definitely been in the hype cycle before, and you don't really realize, and you think you're going to be one of the companies that gets through, but the chances you're going to get through is like 5 or 10%. The VCs, they have just a collection of these companies. And so in aggregate, they're going to be fine. And this is where this vintage of investing is going to be amazing for them if they're able to get into these hot companies. But from a founder perspective, like this is where if you are raising these big rounds, you should be taking something off the table because the likelihood that you're going to actually be one of the next Google or the next Amazon is very, very small. However, there is a chance that you're going to be there, but it's very rational from a VC perspective to be investing in these crazy valuations because there are going to be many, many $1 trillion companies come out of this.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think like a lot of the currently very large companies will increase their market cap. I think there will be some new winners like OpenAI. I don't know that these like tools, like this writer company that's making tools to make it easier to build AI apps. Like I don't see how they're gonna win here.
I think there'll be that's just another category, right? You have like if you compare this to like all of the winners in the last decade of computing, right? You had the very bare bones infrastructure. You had like AWS and GCP, and then you had like the infrastructure application layers on top of that. You had like the Databricks and whatever the Heroku's or whatever, and then you have another layer, and then on the very top you have the application layers that either businesses will use or consumers will use. And so there's going to be winners in all of these different categories, and the categories are just becoming just so large. Like there are going to be winners, and so like I have no idea about this company, but I'm definitely like a huge believer. Like this is AI is going to be a
I think
very
it'll be transformative for a lot of companies, but I think these like companies that are trying to like get into the stack in some way are just pure hype. Like if they're
a
really
lot of
doing
them are.
something
A lot of
useful
them
or
are.
what?
A lot of them are totally. Yeah.
I think like if this is something really useful, like companies, the biggest companies will build it themselves. They'll do it themselves.
No, that's
And
definitely not true.
then you're selling to like small businesses. I don't
Small
know.
businesses now that will potentially turn out to be very large businesses. Like you look at like a Stripe, right? There was lots of other ways that other businesses like Amazon were able to take payments before Stripe. Stripe came along, started selling this to startups. They were able to get companies like Lyft, and then they just blew up. And I think that there's always the reason
I
that
think Stripe is like the one success story
absolutely not.
of
Well,
like being able to uh sell to like a developer API to like really small businesses and get so large. Like I
I think
think
one of the benefits is you as a startup, you're able to look at like these relatively small markets today that the incumbents are not really interested in, and these small markets just turn out to be massive markets. So take an example would be like a Canva or something like that. Like that, what they developed for the marketer who couldn't design or whatever was a relatively small market for like Adobe to go after or something like that. And then they were able to just compound that, and then they turned these marketers basically into the designers and all of this stuff. And now you don't need a designer anymore. And so I think this is the startup world. It just keeps on going round and round and round. And AI is just going to be another layer on top of that. It's going to give more power to other types of companies. Right now, like the kind of like the killer use cases. Obviously, search is one of them right now. Another one seems to be customer support. I hear a lot of companies are like automating like 60 to 80% of their customer support. Now, is that going to go to the incumbents like Zendesk? They're just going to have this, or is this going to be a completely new customer supporting ticket just focused on AI and solving this specifically? Or is it going to be a verticalized version like Gorgeous that solves this for like Shopify sellers? I think that there's just going to be a number of different ways that the incumbents are going to benefit, but also a completely new startups that the incumbents were not even thinking about a certain market are going to benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that there's, like, room for a lot of innovation here. I think the issue I have is, like, these valuations are never going to work for these
It's just, yeah, the valuations make no sense right now, and just think of it as like an option value. If this
but I
does
feel
work,
possible for a tool like this to get to a I mean, for the VCs to make money now, it has to be at, like, a $20 billion valuation eventually when they go to sell. Like, I don't see it getting there. In any kind of like, I
eh,
don't see, reasonable paths that but like this could have been a very successful tool if they're 30 million in ARR. Great. It sounds like they've found a cool niche and they can grow this business. But like, where are the business fundamentals here? Also, how much money are they spending to be 30 million in
yeah,
ARR? Are they like some kind of
yeah, that's
form
true.
of like arbitrage business on the cost that they're paying to provide these models that other companies are building on? Like would be a question I'd have. But assuming they're profitable, I still think it's going to be nearly impossible for them to hit a $20 billion valuation with something like this. I mean, it
I
just
agree.
seems insane.
Well,
Insane fundamentals.
there's also a lot of VCs that missed out on potentially the transformational companies, and they're just trying to play that same game. And like this may be an example of that. I have no idea about this company at all, but this may be an example of a VC that just missed out, and now they're just like they're foaming at the mouth. They have FOMO, and they just want to get into something, and they're willing to overpay for that. And this is a very nice segue
Yeah.
to one of the other pieces of the thing that we wanted to talk about in, I guess, in the logistics tech space. So Dave Clark, who was the previous his last stint was he was the CEO of Flexport. He did that for a year. Previously, he was I don't know if he was a C-suite, but he was a senior manager at Amazon and one of the close allies of Jeff Bezos. And he just started another company, and he just and I think he left Flexport, what, 3 to 6 months ago or something like that, and now he just started a new company and got $100 million worth of funding. And I read their article, and it's just like, there's no real, like, even it didn't even really explain what the fuck they were doing. And he's just like, "Well, we'll hire a bunch of people, and we'll just, like, help people out with supply chains." I know you shared on that. What are your thoughts before this is a little bit more in my wheelhouse, but what do you think
Yeah.
on these, like, massive rounds that kinda come together through these, like, famous, people, that have had success in other areas of business?
I mean, the other thing that confused me is didn't he not have success at Flexport? I mean, you know the story better, but wasn't he like ousted
Yeah, he was
because
fired.
yeah, so like I mean, why are they giving him this much money?
Well, to be clear, when you have like, to be fired is not especially in our come on, in our industry, getting fired doesn't mean that you're not a good whatever founder, employee, or whatever. It's
Sure,
just
but he didn't like have a success there, so that's like null. So then it's like, okay, he did something great at Amazon.
yeah.
Is that like what like that's the thing. Like you work at a big company, like it wasn't you that made Amazon great. Like, unless you're Jeff Bezos, like you were just a cog in the wheel. Even if you're an executive, like you didn't make Amazon what it is today. So that was like, okay, great. So you knew how to manage up and became an executive at Amazon. What was his like success that they're giving him $100 million to produce a V1?
Yeah, I think that's my point as well. Like it's completely different skill set from going 0 to 1 to from what did he probably take Amazon from like 100 to 10,000 or something like that. I don't get this. I also don't get the, hey, I worked at Stripe and I went to some Ivy League school or something. Hey, give me $10 million seed round to go found a company. Like it just, I've seen so many people, and it's hard to generalize because obviously there's counterpoints to all the people who did that that were successful. But I would say generally these companies don't work out. Like what was the famous one? Meg Whitman, so she was CEO at eBay and before, and then they started Quibi, they raised $1 billion and it flopped. Like I think it's just completely different skill sets that you have. But I don't know. I don't understand why VCs continue to back this. It doesn't make sense to me either. Um, but I think they're just taking, I don't know. I
Just
really don't understand.
crazy stuff is getting funded. I mean, it does seem like uh appetite for like maybe because we were in a drought for so long and now VCs just feel like they have to get deals done and get in these deals and spend a lot of money. I don't know, but it does feel like a lot of weird stuff is getting funded for a lot of money and deals are getting more competitive. Maybe because there's a bunch of companies that are not raising and not looking to, have gotten profitable
Yeah.
and don't need to take more funding, that the deals that are happening are just getting more competitive.
Yeah, I definitely I don't get it at all. Also, I don't get the architect of VCs having incubating ideas either and just like hiring the CEO. I don't get those. Those typically don't work out.
Okay, my beef is like these VCs that put out like, here are things I'd love to see people build that I have conviction around. Like, if
Yes.
you're building any of these things, come hit me up. Like, why, if you have so much conviction, why don't you go do it? Like,
Right. Right.
build it yourself. And then how do you have conviction about like this many different things?
Right.
It's like, how hard and long have you really thought about it? It just never. And then are there really founders out there that, like, read these things and are like, "Yeah, I'll build that one." I
There
don't know.
are,
That's
there
better.
are, there totally are. I know a lot of my friends that have been former founders, and they're like, "Oh, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next." So there is a place for that. But
Yeah.
my personal opinion, like, maybe this is just I got a total bias. Like I think it needs to come from you. I think that you have to be so passionate about some problem space or some area or customers or something, or you have some insight yourself personally, and you're just not going to stop until it's actually solved. All of the people that I've seen up close and personal, that just has been like their architect. But obviously, people are trying to like a lot of those companies are probably hard to get into. So VCs they have to try to do creative things. Like there have been some companies that have been incubated in VCs that have been very, very successful.
Yeah.
And there probably have been some executives that have gotten some money and have been successful. So it obviously does work, but probably that's typically not the path to success. But we're founders. Maybe we don't see the other side of the coin.
I mean, yeah, I think an incubator is interesting when it's something you have, like, truly have a lot of conviction around, and maybe you yourself as the VC have this insight and you wanna help build
Yeah.
it, but you don't have time to do it full time. I kind of get that. What I don't get is like, I just wrote a little document and I sent it around, I published it. I mean, it's feels more like content marketing to me. It's
Yeah.
like, really? You had 10 ideas you had conviction about, and you're just like, that's it? You're just gonna write it up and be gone with it? How much conviction did you really have if
Right.
that's all you're doing? Like, did you run a test? Did you try to find the founders that were building something similar? Did you spend any time in the industry? I don't know. Like, I'm just like, these documents are just so. I guess I would caution founders to take one of those documents as the truth, because if the VC hasn't really put a lot of skin in the game
Yeah. Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah.
it may just be more of a content marketing play for them
Right.
to meet founders rather than something they actually truly have thought deeply about.
Yeah, that's another good point too. Yeah. And yeah, just yeah. There's so many different ways that you can I always thought that and anybody who's like you see this a lot on Twitter, TikTok, whatever. It's like everybody wants to make themselves out like they know the way to do certain things. So for whatever reason, and I'll admit it, I go on TikTok. I always get everybody's trying to sell me to become like a real estate entrepreneur, and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go buy a bunch of real. They're like, this is the
Yeah,
only
it's
way
too much
to
work.
build like generational wealth and all these things, and everybody, it just needs to make it seem like there's like one way to do things, but in reality, there's not. Like, there is only ever going to be one Mark Zuckerberg. There was only ever going to be one Brian Chesky. There was only going to be one Melanie Perkins for like everybody has their own story and twists and turns and all of that. And I think ultimately, if you are going to build like there is one commonality they would say. It's like, you gotta fucking work your ass off. You can't fucking quit, and you gonna need to be super passionate about whatever you're building. Those are definitely like the commonalities that I've seen, but there is no one way. Like, I could say I don't like YC, and then somebody could point to so many other counter examples of the current batches of YC that have produced good companies, or some VC incubated company that made no sense, and they found a CEO to take it on that had no connection to the actual problem. So there's always different ways, but that you'll see everybody just marketing them as like, this is the way. I'm the expert at this. Like, you should do the way I want, what I see the world. All these types of things. To maybe it is just to get attention from themselves.
Well, I think that's a good point. It's like you have to do what works to keep you motivated in the long run.
Yeah,
And so like part of this like work from home or remote work or hybrid or back in the office debate, it's like, well, what do you as a founder want? What motivates you? If
right.
you need to be around other people for you as the founder of the company to have the most energy and passion, then you should certainly require everyone to go
That's
back
what
to
I
the
do.
office.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're like me and you just want to focus and it actually stresses you out and is a hard thing to see people every single day, like, then, probably a fully in office culture is not going to be what you want for
Right.
yourself the long term. Even if some of your employees, it means you're not getting the most out of them or it doesn't work for them, then hire the people that work
Yeah. Yeah.
for you and the
Yeah.
environment you want to
Yeah.
work in. And same thing with things like, how much do you pay yourself? Like,
Right.
should you, eh, go to these retreats or not? Like,
Yeah.
if it's working for you, great. If
Right.
it's not, and it's making you not want to work on this company long term, then it's a problem and you gotta pull back.
Yeah. Yeah, doing this for as long as we've done it, we've both seen so many different ways that you can be successful doing it, and even though I have very strong opinions on working remotely, Sarah, I do, but there's so many remote companies that are super successful. So
I mean, or like, a lot of founders, like, as things start tanking, like, they're like, I'm going to stop taking a salary. Like, that's the number one thing. And I've been guilty of this too. Like, there was a period of time where people wanted raises. I didn't know where that money was going to come from. And so I said, I'm going to pay myself less
right,
what I need to pay everyone else. And like, I really regret that. And I think now I sort of
you
feel
regret
like,
that? Interesting.
oh yeah, like, I think founders should take the opposite approach. Like,
Yeah,
you should pay yourself what you need to work on this long term. And then if other people don't want to stick around, that's okay. They're
right,
not the company in the same way that you as the founder and CEO are. And I think like that's something that like I've basically seen every founder make this mistake. Every
right,
first time founder
right.
of like paying themselves last, thinking of themselves last, being in service to their company, whatever work the rest of the company doesn't want to do, you'll take that on. Like, I
Yeah,
was taking the trash cans out because I couldn't really hire anyone to do it and it was below everyone else. So I just took the trash out every week. Like, no, don't do that
right,
because that's going to make you hate your job. And it's better that someone else hates their job, churn out the
right.
company, and then you can hire someone else versus you churn out, the company's over.
That's fair. That's a very good point. Yeah, yeah. But when you first start the company, somebody's got to take out the trash. So
Right, right. But I
yeah,
think often, like, I have the philosophy of like, oh, no one wants to do that work, or that work is below everyone, or we can't quite find someone that it fits in their
right,
job description. I'll just handle it. Like,
yeah,
I take on so much annoying SHIT that no one wants to deal with
right,
or handle. And it's like, well, is this giving me energy and life, or is it really negative for me?
right.
I'm dealing with like a lawsuit right now of the stupidest form, and it's
Oh
just
yeah,
annoying.
that
And it's like,
it just brings you down overall.
I don't want to deal with this. Like, we have to go through the motions. We have to deal with it. But it's like, do I need to be the one dealing with it because it doesn't have a place in the organization? Or is this something we should, pay someone else to deal with, or someone else should just handle? Is it
Yeah,
next?
that's so true. And like you got to think of yourself, founder, CEO, or whatever top level executive, like how much more leverage you have over the entire company. So even small things like you having a positive attitude, or you just like your energy into the company, like if you
Right.
need to take that break, or you need to go work out, or you need to go meditate, or do whatever the fuck you need to do, or you need to pay yourself enough that you don't have to worry about like childcare or something like that. Like you should do that because you're in the ultimate piece of leverage for the company. And everybody else, unfortunately, they just aren't. And I think that it always has been. It was always been backwards. And it's like you as the founders and the CEOs, you should be taking all of doing all the hard stuff and grinding the late nights and all of this. And it's just like, is that the best thing for the company? It's like, no, it's probably not. It's like, it's best if you're working on the most important thing, you are bringing your best attitude, your best work to the company every single day. And whatever needs to get done for that to happen, like that's what you should be doing. And that's what the company should be doing. And the board should be supporting you along the way. And a lot of people do not subscribe to that philosophy, by the way, which is
Yeah, and
extremely
usually I've gotten
frustrating.
better in board meetings. Like, the board will bring something up, like, well, we should explore this area. And
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, here's what it's going to cost to hire someone to help us explore that area.
right.
Right. It's this much. I've already priced it out. I've already looked into it. And they're like, well, couldn't you just like do some initial work here? And I'm like, no, because like there's a bunch of other stuff I'm doing. And if I
Right.
don't do that stuff, we're definitely not going to hit our goals. And so this is what it costs to
Yeah.
hire someone that can explore this area for
Yeah.
us. And it's been really good, I think, to put it in those terms of like things just don't happen without someone doing it. And I think as a founder, we're always like, we'll take it on, we'll add this, we'll, look at this other thing over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But that means you're not doing something else, or you're not bringing your best self to the things that you are
Right.
doing.
Yeah. And then also like thinking about boards like that, that's also why it's really important to try to get like another founder CEO on your board or something like that. Not just to have a bunch of investors that are around the table that are just like pushing you to hit the metrics, but also, hey, they had this cool idea that they thought about for 10 minutes that you should go look and spend like a month of your time on and all this stuff. And somebody to kind of that has been in that same situation, or other independents that can be like the rational voice. And yeah, it's yeah, you have the highest leverage of anybody else in the company. And you should be spending your time on the most important things and saying no to a lot of shit and delegating a lot of stuff
Yeah.
and also being in founder mode all the time.
Founder mode, 100%.
Oh, all right. Well, do you want to end it there, Sarah? Any last
Yeah,
thoughts?
now you've, like, motivated me to get back to work, so
All right,
I'm
back
gonna
to
go
work.
for it.
No,
Founder mode
no,
time.
no events. No, um, uh,
Till I fly out
boondoggles.
at 6:15 tomorrow is my flight, so, yeah,
There we go.
an early wake up.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. See you later, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.